Okay, so if anybody's watched my videos before, then they'll know that the next thing I do after I've done my head is I go on to my bodies. So I'm going to get all of our body pieces here, and you should have 5 of 2, 5 sets of 2 pieces is what I mean. Okay, and we've got our little notches marked in our Frixion pen on the side here, and that's fine. So what we're going to do now is we're going to separate out 3 of them, because we're going to use those as our main body, and then we'll take our extra pieces from the other 2 pieces that we've got. So I've got 3 pieces here. And on these 3 pieces here, what we're going to do is we are going to sew all the way round. Now we have to remember where our leg position is, because this is going to be let me have a think about it. This is going to be the back. So, oh no, that's interesting the way that Sarah's done that. That's one side of the tummy. Right. So what I want you to do is locate where your leg dart is and have your leg dart to the left-hand side of the character, because we're going to sew all the way down this edge here, because these notches here that we only need to leave those open on the centre back seam. So on these front seams, we're just going to sew from this point all the way. You're going to ignore those notches there and all the way down to this section just here. We're going to reverse stitch at the start and reverse stitch at the bottom, and we're going to do that on all 3 of these pieces. So again, we can use that chain piecing, so make sure that your position is in the right one for your seam allowance. So I've moved my needle across to position number 7, and I'm going to start from the very top, and I'm going to reverse stitch, and I'm going to put my needle in my work just to hold that down. Pin this if you need to hold this together, whatever you need, but if you're careful, the calico does stick together. So we're just going to carry on all the way down and ignore those notches. Nice and steady. And then we're going to put our needles in our work, so now we can lift up our presser foot so that we can pivot. Just change direction for a few stitches. So we want to get these nice curve on the edge of these bodice pieces. We're just going to sew round, and we can flatten out, and then we're going to stop in line with the notch on the bottom edge. So we are sewing the side furthest away from our tailor's tack. So again, we can then just take that one out the way. I'm going to introduce my next one, line up and sew from one onto the other. So this is that chain piecing again that we've spoken about already. Make sure your raw edges are together, because that will affect the size of your character. And when your fabric starts bunching up, you know you've got to just lift it, release the pressure, and start and do that pivoting to get around to the bottom of this character. So you're doing one side of the tummy at this stage. That's why we don't need to stop for the back, because we only need the notches on the back edge, and reverse at the end. Needle in, just move that one out the way and get our last one, because we only need the edge for stuffing on the last one, which is what the notches are there to signify. So reverse again. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. This one's shifting slightly, so let me just reposition it. That's it. And we're only sewing on these up until that little notch on the very bottom near the tailor's tack. Just reverse at that point. Okay, so needle up, we can take our threads out, and now we can separate the 3 of them and take off our starting threads. Okay, what we're going to, let's just lay those all down so they're all together in one section just there. The next thing we're going to do now is take our other ones here, where we've got the last 2 with the 2 pieces in, because we only need 3 pieces of this. So just make sure that when you open them up, you put them so that your right sides are down onto your work surface when we pick them up. And that's a spare piece of fabric, so one of your little body pieces will be spare, so keep that out the way. What we're going to do then is let's take our first one, and then we've sewn the edge around, so you can see I've sewn my edge all the way around here. Okay, so we've got our 3 sets here all sorted out, and we've got our 3 ones here, and I've discarded one of the single pieces because that's no longer needed. So then we're going to take our first one here, and we're going to open up the 2 sections. There's the seam that we've already sewn. And then opening it up, we're going to take one piece, and we're wanting to pop that onto the back here. And what we're going to do is open it out so that you can match up the points at the top. And we are going to need some pins now. And let's put a pin holding that together at the top. And then we're going to come down to the bottom just here and locate where your notch is. And we're going to put the end of that seam that we've sewn already at that bottom notch and put a pin in there. We can then match the other notches together, even though we're not going to leave them open, but we can use those as reference points to match together, just to make sure that this all sits together nicely. And what we're trying to do as well on these is we need to make sure that we've got our tailor's tacks in the right position, because this is going to be a tummy and that's going to be the legs. And when we turn it round, we want those to be in the right position. So this could be a little bit confusing. We might have to guesstimate those in the end. Those 2 should be okay, so they're on top of each other. This is going to be the tummy. So I've decided which is going to be my tummy piece, and I've taken the tailor's tack out of my tummy piece. So your bodies are made of three of these teardrop shape sections. And what we want is the flattest one is going to be the tummy, and then there's going to be 2 that has a gap between the back of them that is going to be where we open and stuff it, and that's going to be the back. So what we're going to do now is lay this section that we've just added that's not attached in any way to the section that's already sewn, and if we fold out the part at the top there that we've already got that's sewn and open up that seam allowance, you can lie the point of your new piece on top of the other 2 pieces, and it should be about right. And we're going to sew in, start 1/4 inch in from the edge, and I've pinned it all the way through down to the bottom. So starting 1/4 inch in and reverse with your stitches. And then when you've stopped, take your needle in the work just to hold it all steady. And then we're going to sew down this edge completely. We're not leaving a gap. It's lunar Lapin. There had to be a little bit that was complicated, didn't there? Okay, I'm just taking that pin out because that's in my way. That one's fine. So yeah, keep going down. And then when you get to the point where you need to start and pivot, then you can lift up your presser foot and just move round your corner. And you're going up to where you can see that your previous seam was stitched, and there you're going to reverse and stop. You're not going to sew all the way around. And you reverse stitch as well. So if I show you what you've got like 3 segments of your tier. So there's one segment all nice and flat. Here's the other segment, still with the tailor's tack in towards the open edge. And then there's the other section there with the tailor's tack open to the other edge. And what we're going to do now, if you took your tailor's tacks out of the way so that they stay in the body, we are now going to put a pin, and we'll use my red pin trick. So choose a red topped pin, and then where your notches are on the back, we're going to leave that open. So I put a pin there, and I put a pin at my other notch. That reminds me to start and to stop stitching at those points. And then I've got the top points, all 3 are together. And at the bottom here where we started stitching, we've got what's called a Y seam. See, that's a bit like a letter Y. And so we fold the 2 seams that we've already stitched on top of each other. That exposes this stitching here, and we're going to start right where those stitches finished and start around here and then sew up to here, but stop just 1/4 inch away from the very top there. Put your needle in your work because you'll need to pivot. Right, so up to the red needle and pin, and then you're going to take your pin out when you're getting close, and then sew up to roughly where it was, and then reverse. Needle out of your work, and then you're going to go back to where you were, to the next red pin, take the pin out, and then you're going to do a few stitches reverse just where you are there, and then sew up to the top point, but just stop just 1/4 of an inch away and reverse. So you end up with this teardrop shaped stitching. You can just take off your threads because I just carried my threads across the opening. And then we've got this three portioned body shape. If I show you at the end there how it looks, and if I show you there at the top how it looks. Okay, so then what we're going to do now is pull these two parts away from each other. Put your thumb and finger inside and go down to the bottom and then grip it, and then you can then turn that round just by pushing it through. So we're trying to push through rather than pull, because that does seem to help on the seams. You need to just be careful with the opening because we don't want that to stretch. And we're going to take our nice rounded ended knitting needle again and poke it inside, and we are going to then just start and spread out these seams that we've got, and we're going to go into the top, into this neck edge, because this point here is where we're going to put our neck edge. Our head's going to sit on top of this little spike, if you like. Okay, so you can run the knitting needle along the seams just to push those out, make sure they're nicely defined. And then we're going to start stuffing. So of course, you know what I'm going to say, you're going to repeat this for the other two bodies as well, so that you can make sure that they're done as well as possible, and then you can just rewind the video to see the bodies again if you need to and have a reminder. Sorry I was a bit confusing about the positioning for the legs, but we'll use those later, and we'll show how they all come together and what to do if you got a bit mixed up on that section, because I'm sure that might have happened to somebody, and how we can then, I'll triangulate, if you like, where that position is for you, so don't get too hung up on there. So go ahead and do your other bodies and get these stuffed, and then I'll come back to show you the stitch that I use in order to close up the opening for you. Okay, so we've got 3 bodies here, all nicely stuffed. You can see they've got that Y seam at the bottom there, and you can see how the tailor's tacks are just sticking out on the 2 sides that have got the section that needs closing up. Do make sure that you stuff your neck edge quite hard. This is going to be the bottom where they're going to sit with the legs, and this is the head edge, because that's got to be pushed inside. Whoops! The head's got to be pushed onto that point there, that spike, in order then to be fixed down. And if you don't have enough stuffing into this section here and it's not firm enough, then that head will just have a tendency to flop. And so it depends on the look you're going for, but I like my heads to kind of stay upright. So the next section then that I've got is I've got a hand sewing needle and a length of the cream thread, and I've got a knot at the end of it, and my thread's double. And what I want you to kind of notice is if you pull out these seam allowances on the edge of these openings here, then that'll give you a better idea of where you're aiming for. Because we're going to sew this close, trying to keep to the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance that we've used when we've been machine stitching. So the first thing I do with my needle is I'm going to come out a couple of stitches ahead of where I finish sewing. So there's where I finish sewing, and there's where my needle's coming out, because I like the knot to have no tension on it at all. So I'll take a little stitch there across that opening, and another one very close together, and that'll just hold that knot in place for me so it won't pull through. And there's no tension on those starting stitches at all, so that I don't feel I've got any risk of it popping open. So then I'm just going to take another little fine stitch right on the folded edge of that seam allowance, just to bring my stitches down to where our opening starts to be. Just like that, okay, so just nice and neat. Then we're going to do what's called a ladder stitch, and we create the rungs of our ladder with our thread. So this is why we need to know roughly where that 1/4 inch seam allowance is on either side, because come out on the left side at the moment, so I'm going to come across to the right side and I'm going to take just a stitch through a few threads, just one side. Don't try and go all the way across the other, all in one go. So now I'm on the right side and I'm going to take a stitch on the folded edge where that seam allowance is on the right side only. And you're not tightening it up yet, you're just taking those stitches. Just make sure your threads stay together and don't have a knot in them. I've just crossed over mine. Okay, so we've got a rung of our ladder just there, look. Can you see that? So now we take a stitch just on the right side of that seam allowance. Don't pull it tight, just so that your thread's lying nice and neat. And then we go across the other side and take another stitch. So you're trying to keep to the 1/4 inch seam allowance as you go along this seam, and you just keep going from side to side. Now I've done up to about 7 stitches, it depends how the thread runs through. So I've done about 5 now. Let me just tuck that stuffing in and out of the way so that it's not going to be a nuisance for us. And you can see the ladders of our stitches, just the rungs of our ladder there. And this is where the magic happens. So then when I pull on my thread, can you see those stitches coming together and it pulling together, and it closes it up nicely. I've got a little bit of stuffing caught in mine, but I can just pull that out, or I can snip it out afterwards. So then when you've done that, just let your stitches go again and carry on. So again on the right hand side, make sure your thread's lying nice and flat, and then again on the left hand side. Just use your fingers or your thumb just to indent the fabric, just so that you can sew those edges. As I say, you're just imagining where that 1/4 inch seam allowance is, just to keep it nice and straight. And then when you've done about 4 or 5 stitches again, just pull on it again and it'll just tighten up. Don't pull it so tight that it snaps your stitches, and if you get a little loop, just separate out your threads and just pull them one at a time, and that will then neaten that off again for you. Oops, I've got a little thread on mine. And then you carry on all the way along this little opening. And this is called a ladder stitch because of those little rungs to the ladder that you get. And then when, as I say, when you cinch it in, it goes nice and flat. And we're doing this on the back edge because the back tends to want to sit nice and straight, doesn't it? Whereas the sides of the other sections are quite curvy because they're simulating the tummy and the rib cage of our little characters. So again, just pull that tight. And it goes in quite, you get better at this the more you do it. And it is just about taking even stitches if you can, and trying not to get ahead of yourself on one side than you are on the other. But don't forget, these characters are going to be covered in clothes anyway. So again, try not to get too hung up if it's your first time, because practice will make perfect. And we can manipulate the stuffing around inside afterwards, just to make sure that we've got a nice rounded body. Tuck your threads in if you need to from your stuffing. It isn't my neatest one, this one is actually, but hopefully you'll bear with me and get the gist. Apologies for the road noise. Let's just give this a bit of a tweak, see if we can get it looking any neater. So there we go. So we've got this will neaten up as we go down again. So then what I do is I go a couple of stitches past where the thread finished off before, because that then just takes the pressure off the end of that stitching, and then I then start to go back down again, doing the same thing. But if I took fairly big stitches last time, I try and make sure that my stitches are in between where I was last time for my previous stitch in that same position. Just make sure you don't get any loops. and just indent your character's body if you need to get a better grip at all. So I'm working my way back down, and this time you can start to go backwards and forwards through. It's a bit easier when now you've got it actually closed together. As I say, apologies, this isn't my neatest. On felt especially, you can, or the faux fur, you can get a really neat finish. But calico's a little less forgiving, just because by the nature of it, but that's okay. All the way down to the bottom again, and then I'm going to do a few stitches in place at the bottom just to knot this off, hold it together. A few little back stitches along that seam tend to be quite useful at keeping it all together. And so make sure you've got no loops, because they do show up. So yeah, it's not my neatest, but you get the gist. And then when you're ready to close off, put your needle inside and then push through so that you've got a nice long tail on your threads. Put some tension on your threads and then snip. Oops, it's going to drop, that's it. And then you can see that that's then all together. So that's our tummy section there, and our bottom. This is where our legs are. Just managed to keep some tailor's tacks in there, and then the ladder stitch there, which is going to be covered either by Mary's clothes or Florin's clothes or not. And I've got a few little whiskers, so if I just carefully just go along the edge, just with my scissors just flat, then you can start and take off those extra fibres that you've got just in there to make that nice and neat, ready for having a head attached. But I think on these I'm going to do all of the limbs first and then come back and attach them all in one go. I think that will be a better take of time. So I'm going to ladder stitch my other two closed, and then we've got our 3 heads finished, and then we'll have our 3 bodies finished, and then we'll move on to the legs, which is my least favourite part, and then we'll do the arms, and then we'll attach everything all together at that point then. So that's what we'll do. So if you want to get yours finished and get yours to this stage, make sure your stuffing's nice and flat and even in those, and then we'll come back and we'll be working on our legs. Okay, so our completed body parts are starting to stack up. We've got our 3 bodies completed and our 3 heads. So now the next bit I'm going to start working on is the legs, which is actually my least favourite part of this. Where have I put my foot pads? Oh, hold on a second. I'm pleased to report something. I haven't forgotten to cut out the foot pads. There actually aren't any, which makes the legs so much easier. So I've just had a quick look in the instructions, and it says to sew the legs, we sew all the way around, just leaving the gap. And then the stuffing must give them the shape in order that we then fill out and put into the boots. So I thought I'd made a major faux pas and missed a bit out, but I haven't. So let's get on with doing the legs then, with a new enthusiasm that I didn't have before. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use our red pin trick. We're going to locate where the notches are for the back of the leg. One there, and then where's the other one gone? It'll be just slightly up, won't it? Round about there, I think. So just going to allocate a length on the back of the leg there, where we're going to stop, and I'm going to start here, 1/4 inch seam allowance, reverse stitch down to the bottom, pivot here, we'll do that 1 stitch across the edge, down to here again, a pivot, 1 stitch across the edge, follow all the way round, and then finish with a reverse stitch just here again. So if you get your stitching ready to go, and you're going to have 6 of these to complete. We can see if we won't be able to do the chain piecing because we're not starting at the bottom of an edge here, so it's easier if we just carry on and do these singly. So I've switched my machine off, so let me just get my my needle back into the right place, give me my 1/4 inch, and I'm going to take my red pin out and put my needle in my work. So let's sew down to the bottom here. That's all quite nice and easy, and these stay together nicely. So down to about 1/4 inch, one stitch on the 45-degree angle and then across the edge, across the sole of the foot, down to where we need to be, another stitch 1/4 of an inch in, and then we're going to do our pivoting. We've got quite a strong curve here, so needle in the work, lift up your foot and just do across the edge just for 2 or 3 stitches. The sharper the curve, the more often you need to change direction. And we'll have the same again on the heel here, so don't start to curve too soon, but just take a couple of stitches just to start going. Make sure your raw edges are together. And again, my fabric's starting to bunch up, so needle in the work and just a couple of stitches round. Let's just put those threads out the way for our tailor's tacks. I'm just trying to get a nice curve on the top of these legs. And you'd be surprised how curvy they can go with just doing a couple of stitches at a time and then just changing direction. There we go, down towards the red pin. Take that out before you get to it, a few more stitches, and then just reverse. And needle out the work. Can you tell how excited I am now? I've not to any feet pads. So there we go. So you might not be able to see my stitching very, very well, but I've started here, reversed all the way down. We've done the diagonal stitch just here on the edge there, across the toe, diagonal stitch just there, and then all the way around. Now on these, I am again going to use my pinking shears, and just where it's the curved edges, I'm just going to take a little bit of that bulk out of the edge there. I didn't on the bodice because the bodice is quite a gentle curve. And then the other place you're going to need to do that is in this section just here, where the ankle is. So just take a little bit out of there, and then around by the toes. And then on the back of the heel here, we'll just take the notch off just there, and on the toes we'll just take a little notch off there, and that should work. So then we are then going to pull our sections apart. Now this is going to be the one that's going to be difficult to turn, but let's try our little trick again, where especially going into the foot. So let's tuck that, pull the 2 sides of the ankle apart, and I'm going to tuck that foot in as far as I can. And it's not going to want to go all the way, but give it a good old wiggle. Push it up, and then we want to push it using our knitting needle, holding onto the edges. Just want to pull like this and wiggle it and head it towards that exit there. And there we go. Excuse the noises outside. We live in an apartment block, and so in Spain, and so it's gets a little bit noisy sometimes, and if I wait until it's all quiet, I'll be sewing at 3 in the morning, and even then it might not be quiet. Okay, so we can just, while we've got this open, let's just use this edge of this needle, knitting needle, just to push out through the toe. We can use the point later, but just for now we want the blunt end just to be able to get that as much as we can out. And that's done quite well already. And then we can then do the same with the others. Let's pull the 2 sides of the thigh apart, tuck it up inside. I'm actually going to take those tailor's tacks out because mine are the dark threads and I don't want to get those stuck in. Although they are going to be covered, it's less noticeable, isn't it, on the bodies, so they're not going to be quite so noticeable as they were on the faces. And just keep pulling that through. So it is possible to turn these without the prim turning tools that Sarah does recommend, but you might obviously find it easier if you have got some of those. I don't have those, so I'm doing it my old-fashioned way. So quite thin legs. And there we go, there's one leg already. So next thing then we're going to do is get our stuffing, and we're going to stuff into our gap, and we're going to make sure that we stuff right down well into that toe area. and then up into the thigh area, and then I'm going to use the ladder stitch again to close this edge just here where we've stuffed them. And so we're going to do that now for all 6 of our legs. I'm going to sew them, turn them, stuff them, and then ladder stitch them closed, and then we'll come back when I'm onto the arms. Okay, so then we're going to take our arm pieces, we're going to locate our notches again. We're going to use a red pin to indicate the start and stop. Now there is quite a big gap for the turning through, so I'm going to actually reduce that down somewhat, because that just means less to hand stitch at the end, and I don't want it to be showing too much. So I've just left about a couple of inch and a half gap there. So just put those pins in to denote where you're going to start and stop. And I'm going to reverse stitch here. I just want to show you how I get around the thumb, and just in case you've not done a thumb before, and then we're going to go around the top of the edge like we did before. We're going to reverse stitch as we sewed before, and it's still 1/4 inch seam allowance on all of these little body parts, so just reverse stitch and then needle in the work, because we've got a lot of pivoting to do, but we know how to do that now, so it's not scary at all. So let's just sew down. As it starts to bunch, just lift up the presser foot and you'll see the tension on your fabric release. Start to come down and round, and start to change your direction to keep your 1/4 inch seam allowance, and just stitch round your bottom of your hand. Just literally just do 1 or 2 stitches at a time. Soon goes, it doesn't slow you down too much. If you're used to zooming on your machine, then this kind of precision sewing is going to feel a bit different, but because of such small pieces it doesn't take long. So we're on to the bit where we're going to come up into the thumb. Now let me just where's my Frixion pen? Let me show you how we're going to stitch this. So I'm just coming down here, if I get my pen to work. This is heat erasable pen, don't worry, it's not a... So I've just come in down here. Now you need to come up into this section here, and then you need to do a sharp pivot to do a V there, and then to go round like here to do your thumb. Let me just draw this in a little bit darker for you. Hold on a second. So the black line here is our stitching line. So we're going to sew round, so we started here, down here, round this curve here, down to here. We're going to drop our needle in there where it is anyway, and then change direction almost back on ourselves to do this V here. Then we're going to do a couple of stitches, a stitch across the end, and then we're going to start and come up this edge just here. And that's where I'm just at the moment. So I'm just changing direction just with 1 stitch at a time. So just making my V, so into the V, and then change, as you see, I've changed direction completely with my stitching. Just 1 stitch down, 1 stitch across, and then start to change your direction again. Give you a lovely little thumb, this will. And then up this far edge, nice and fairly straight. We're going to start and come to the curve again, so we're going to start and change our direction. We need to keep to our seam allowance, because otherwise the clothes aren't going to fit, are they? They're going to be too big. Well, or too small. If we take too much seam allowance, they'll be too big, and if we take too little, they'll be too small. So reverse at the end there. Take off our starting and stopping thread so you can see. And hopefully you can see there, that's how I've stitched round. So round into there, change direction, then come across. There's not a lot of seam allowance at the end there, but that's okay. Now, into the point, where's the one that I marked on? So into that point just there, you're going to see me snip, and I'm going to do 1 snip from the crevice here to the little valley in there, and I'm going to snip through, not through, but up to, almost up to my stitches. Let me just do my little snip while I'm just concentrating, like that. So can you see? So it's pointing down into that crevice, just where that thumb mark is. So I've not gone all the way up to the stitches, but as close as I can without compromising that stitch seam. And that's what you need to do. Because then what we can do is we're going to pull up the sides of our arm apart, or we're going to snip this. We probably ought to just put some snips around this curve because it's quite sharp, isn't it? Just putting a few little snips in the fabric, but not through the stitches. And then again on here, I can use my pinking shears just to take a little bit off just here, just to help that go through nicely. Okay. Just so that you can see those have got some little snips in just going through. So then we're going to pull the sides of the hand apart. Oops, come on fabric. You can always poke something through first just to separate those two edges first. And then I tuck my hand inside like that, just pulling on the flat side seams, and you can tuck it. And you want to like a little hole in there, not a whole hole, but a gap in there. And then if you hold on to the seam outside the side, you can wiggle it when it's over the top of your knitting needle, and it'll just get that edge out for you. And then just to get the little seam, just use the gentle point of your knitting needle and just gently just tease that out a little bit. Just giving my little end of my knitting needle a little twist as well every now and again, and that seems to help. And there you can see we've got a little thumb. So let's just do the same for this side now. Just pull those edges apart and tuck it through. So I'm trying not to pull too much on the sides of these openings because we don't want that fabric to stretch. Now once you've got it open, you can pop your knitting needle in again, the blunt head. And you'll see I use the blunt head more than I use the point, just to get that open and get that out, and then get round those edges. So there we've got a lovely, lovely little hand with our gap for stuffing it and our nicely defined thumb. So I'm going to go ahead now and do the rest of the thumbs and hands in this same way so that those are ready. And then I'm going to stuff these, paying particular attention to put a little bit into the thumb and make sure the hands are nicely firm. And then I'm going to ladder stitch closed on the back here. So I'm going to go and do all of those now, and then I'll come back to you, because then the next stage we've got after that is then construction. And the one thing I've got to just remembered is we need to remember to put our little tail on the back of those as well. So shout at the screen if I forget those, but we'll get those out of the haberdashery box so that I remember those bits. Okay. Just reverse the video if you need to see any more, but the process is the same for all 6 of your arms as it was for all 6 of your legs. Get those all stuffed, ladder stitch them all closed, and meet me back here, and we're going to get on to construction. Okay, so it's some time later. I've remembered why I don't like stuffing animals' arms and legs. That's been the most tedious bit so far, has been stuffing, particularly the legs, and just getting the stuffing into the toes there really, and the end of the feet. The arms went a little bit easier, but again it's a lot of ladder stitching and what have you. Break it up if you need to, put your favourite programme on TV or series and just get through those as you can do, or break it up into smaller amounts to do in one go. One thing I did forget to say that when I was doing my bodies is that I like to put a little affirmation in my characters, and because the heads are still open, then I'm going to pop it in the heads instead. So what I've done is I've taken 3 little felt hearts that I've just cut out, and I've also got a little scrap piece of fabric here, and I just have used a ink stamp pad, a Crafter's ink stamp pad. This brand isn't available anymore, but that's the sort of thing you want for fabric and for fabric, wood and other things. And then I've got a little stamp pad that I got from Sostrine Green. So you can freeze that if you want to. And what I do with my characters is I just pop in these little words. So I've chosen 3 words that I think belong to Christmas, which is joy, hope and love. And I'm just cutting them around them with my pinking shears, having stamped those onto here. Let me just show you these. They're a bit creased, but it was not a matter, they're going to get creased up anyway. So joy, hope and love. And then what I'm going to do is, because I don't want the heart to show through at all, I'm going to wrap the heart in the little piece of fabric, and then I'm going to just push that in just in the neck edge, just so it just keeps it together. and doesn't start to migrate into the other parts of the characters where it might be seen. But I just like that little touch. I mean, again, this is just something you really don't need to do. I just think it's cute. So that's why I do that. But normally I put them into the bodies because there's more room in the body and you can bury it right in the middle. But I forgot. So apologies for forgetting. Let me just pack this away and we'll get on to construction, because now we've got that bit done, we're down to construction. So what I want you to do is have a look at your heads, because you need to be choosing. I think that's a nice one for Mary, probably. And then the other two, I think, will do nicely. Yeah. So we're choosing now which faces go with which characters. So I'm going to put them in order. So that's going to be Florin, that's going to be Mary, and that's going to be Pere Hiver. Yeah, I'm happy with those. Bodies, the three are the same, so I'm not going to worry about those. But I'm just allocating out the body parts now, just so that we can get organised with these. Now, with the hands, have a look at the hands and just see. You want to try and get the thumbs pretty much the same if you can do, or get an equal set of hands. That's quite a nice little short one. That can go with Mary. And I'm just, oh, there, it's a nice match that can go with Pere Hiver. And then hopefully those, yeah, they're fine. Okay, so you might find that when you're looking at yours, there's no difference. But just for now, I'm just going to put some of these out of the way because, because I don't need them all right in front of me. And the arms and the faces, I think, are the most important, because they are the characters of your animals, really. And then the legs, we just want to have, just put them against each other, just see how they kind of fit. That's got a narrow toe, so let's just see if that one, they're good ones, that can go there. And anything that you feel has got a bit of a flaw, so like there, that's not quite as rounded on the end there. So I'm going to make sure that goes with the character, so like Pere Hiver that goes in, has got boots on. And then these two here, these two can be Mary. Right, okay. So we've got them into our little groups now. The next thing you're going to need is a doll needle, which is the best one to use. No, it's not. Hold on a second. We're going to put the heads on first. You don't need a doll needle for your heads, but you will need some pins. So tuck in your little affirmation if you're using it. Make sure the edge of your neck is all turned in. And then you're looking, so the seam where we ladder stitched is the back seam, and this flat one here is the tummy. And what we're going to do is we're just going to pop the head on top so that the centre seam of your, under the chin, goes down the centre of the body. And then I take a bite out of the body, a bite out of the head, and then back into the body again if I can. If my pins will cooperate with me. That's the front on. And then I go to the back. And then you can tuck up the bit of the seam allowance that we know needs to go in the back there, to get that nicely sitting down. And then the centre back seam needs to match up with the centre of the head seam. So a bite of the head, a bite of the body either side of that seam, and then a bit again on the other side. Now, as you can see, we've got a bit of a list on. So just try and straighten that up as best as you can, but we can straighten it up with some more pins. Now you have got to be careful because these pins are going to stick out now until we've actually got this tacked on. But I usually use 4 pins when I'm making my main lunas and the other characters. So I'm going to go for the same again. You're just trying to get up into that neck edge and then down again. Okay, so that's evened up, looks nice and straight on the body. It's not sitting straight yet. The bodies were all sitting straight before, but they weren't. Oh, it can do now. There we go. So, because the legs are going to go on and they're going to be the main stabilising thing on these characters, and then the arms will go on last. So now we need to thread up our needle. Now I've got some extra, no, I'm not going to use some extra thread. I'm going to use this thread here because these aren't going to be carried around as toys, are they? They're going to just be sitting on a shelf probably, which is nice. So I'm just going to thread a needle up with my cream thread that I've had off my machine, ready for sewing this on. So you've just got to be careful because you've got those pins sticking out at all 4 angles now. You've got to be careful because you don't want to be stabbing yourself, especially with this white calico. I have heard that if you do prick yourself, either cold water or even some of your own spit, I know that sounds a bit disgusting, but should I say saliva? Saliva, that's a nicer word, isn't it? A bit of your own saliva will get out any marks, just in case that happens to you. Okay, so we've got the head on, kind of happy with how that's doing. I might just straighten this up just a little bit more. Just come a little bit low on the body if you want to, and then tuck that in. Yeah, okay. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to bury the end of the needle first. So we're going to tuck up with our needle up inside the head, so just through a gap, and then we're going to come out on the side here. Once we've been round once, we'll be able to take these pins out, but just for now, you've just got to just be careful, and then if you can, just use your needle just to tuck those ends in, but we can do it later when we get more on. I'm going to put my glasses on, because this is close up, so I need to be thinking of what we're doing. And then we're going to do a bit of a ladder stitch all the way round, really. So I'm in the head, so I'm now going to take a bite out of the body. Doesn't have to be particularly delicate at this stage, so I'm probably doing a couple of 1/8 of an inch of a stitch, and then out on the body again. So your pins are going to start and get in the way, so I can take that one out because we've attached the back of the head now, and then one back in the body again. Just try and keep your threads together so they don't start to separate on you and leave loops in when you're stitching. And then I'm just coming out of the head again, so just about that much on there. Once we've been around once, those pins will come out, but we just need them in just for the moment. Then back into the body again. And back into the neck again. You're just alternating those stitches out. Later on we'll do a stitch where we go through both at the same time, but just for this first go round, I always just do it separately like this, because I can just seem to get my stitches in a little bit better. So we're finished with that pin now, so that one will come out. One less to stab ourselves on. These characters are going to look so cute once they're all dressed. I am excited about getting on to doing their dresses, I must admit, and their clothes. That is my favourite bit. So again, in through under the chin, another stitch, and then through the body again, all the way round. So if this is a bit tedious, just fast forward through this little bit, but I just want to kind of show you in real time that you do have to take your time doing some of these steps, because I think sometimes people think these are a really quick sew, and they aren't. I mean, don't take years, but oh, ouch, that was my finger on one, so I need to be careful I don't get anything red on my character. So that's that one out. And now we'll just working towards the final pin being out and back to round to where we started. So at this stage we're just, oh, that's gone around the pin. Take that one out for now so I can tighten that up, because we're kind of there-ish. Can you see how it starts to move as soon as you take the pin out? That's why I like the pins in most of the way round. But I'd just got my thread round it, so I had to. And normally when I'm making the normal characters, I brace them against my chest while I'm just sewing, because you can get into the head a little bit better that way. But just for now, these will do. So there's my starting threads. Let me just scoop those up inside with the point of my needle. And I'm just going to carry on going round. Bit out of the head, bit out of the body. Just make sure that seam allowance is tucked in, because you want to get a neck. We don't want to have too thick a neck. Nearly there. For the first go round, I normally do on my Lunas, and characters, I normally do 2 or 3 circuits round the head. So I've just got a bit of a gap there, so let me just do a nice stitch to cinch that in. Okay, so that's the first pass round with the head. And now I've done a bit of a stitch on it on top of itself, so now I'm going to go round again. And again, I'm just trying to do the same thing, but this time I'm just going into the body and then into the head. And then you can come down again. And you're trying to put stitches in between the stitches you've already got on there. That's the aim of the exercise. So you're kind of making the stitches close together each time as you go round. Okay. And also just make sure that you're happy with your head. There's a little bit of a list on, but we can straighten them up. And sometimes that gives them a bit of character if they're got a bit of a list on, but you won't want it to be too pronounced, I wouldn't have thought. But then they are your character, so you can choose how they look. If you want a drunken elf or a crazy angel, then that is absolutely your choice. Which is the fun of these things, isn't it? How to personalise them. So yeah, so I'm just going to go round now. I'm just going sort of in and out through the neck and then through the body. And as you can see, that's starting to neaten it up again a little bit more. And then if you want to, you can go round again. I think 3 times is plenty. I don't think I'd ever do 4 times round, but I'm borderline about twice round. I think the more secure they are, the better, really. Because again, you don't want having to go back in and mending them, do you, in a couple of years' time, if you can help it. You're just hiding those stitches and just making it all nice and neat, and making sure that everything's all on nice and tight. So that's 2 goes round, and as you can see, the heads aren't moving. Their ears are moving, but the heads aren't moving. A little bit of a list to one side, but again, we can just mess about with the stuffing, and also the legs going on will stabilise these characters as well. Okay, so I'm just going to take some more stitches round, and then we're going to finish off. And the way that we finish off is we take a few stitches in place together. Little back stitches are really useful. And then when we've done that bit, then we will then finish off our stitch by leaving a long tail, by going through the body like you've seen me do before, because I think it's more difficult for stitches to come undone if they've got a long tail on them. Right, I'm going to come back to you when I'm at finishing stage, because otherwise you're going to be bored silly. Okay, back in a minute. Okay, so we're all the way around now, so I'm going to do a couple of little back stitches almost right in that neck crease, because those little back stitches, you'll be surprised how strong they can be. And they do just cinch everything in and just tighten everything up. Okay, so I'm happy with that now. So I'm going to come out, so I'm going to go back in again almost where I came out, maybe 1 thread's different, and I'm going to go across the body. Make sure you know where the needle's coming out before you let go, otherwise you'll lose your threads. Put some tension on the thread, just pull on the thread a little bit, and then you can cut through your thread, and then because it's the thread's under tension, it disappears then inside. So this is Florin, is doing well. Trying to make him stand, but he doesn't want to. Right, okay, next thing we're going to do is now get our doll needles. So excuse my squeaky chair. And I've got 3 sizes of doll needles. These are the hemline doll needles that I use, with the 3 different lengths in. And the smallest one is 3 inches, and that's more than enough for going through the legs and the arms, I believe. Yeah, we should be fine with that. You'll also need your haberdashery pack. Where have I put that? Because you'll need 4 buttons, 4 of the white buttons per character, 2 for arms and 2 for legs. So let's pop those out in our sections as well, so that we've got everything we need in each section. 2 there, 2 there, 2 just there, And there's one, where's the other one? There it is. Right, okay, and 2 there. So 4 per character for those. And put our haberdashery to one side. Right. Then you can choose what thread you need. I'll use my extra strong thread because I've got it. I think I might as well. There's no reason for me not to use it. So just let me just grab that, wait a second. Okay, so this is the thread that I use for sewing on all of my characters' arms and legs. It's Coats Epic 050. It is super, super strong. So it's perfect for the characters when they're going to be toys. And I actually can't break this thread with my bare hands. There's just no way that I can break that. So I like to use this because it's just really, really strong. And as you can see, I take about 2 meters of thread. I use quite a lot because I'd rather use it all up. No, I'd rather have some left over at the end than use it all up and have to start again. So let's just take that to the end. I've got it double as well. You can see how strong it is, so you know how strong this is going to be. The only thing you do need to make sure, if you have your thread straight, is that your needle will go through the holes on your buttons, and that will do. Okay, so let's have a look. I'm going to do legs first. Now I have managed to keep my tailor's tacks in, but I did say I was going to triangulate this for you, wasn't I? So if we look from the centre towards the slightly to the back of the, so if we've got the back seam edge, then my tailor's tack is 1 inch from that centre point just there, and then wherever that 1 inch hits, it's then about 7/8 of an inch in from the bottom seam from here. Okay, so you've got an inch from the centre point here underneath to the edge there. And what I would do if I was doing it is I would just measure that out. So you want to be slightly towards the backbone or back seam and put a pin in. And then I'd go to this point here and I'd measure 7/8 just along from where the flatness of the bottom kind of stops, and then I'd put a pin in just to make sure, and that's 7/8 of an inch in from there, and that will give you a rough idea of where you need to be. The next thing that I do with my long threaded needle is I then take my thread and I'm going to go in where that pin is and come out with the centre of the other side, which would be the same measurement, and I just take a stitch backwards and forwards. Just like that. So I could take the pin out now, and because we've got our positioning, we'll be able to take our tailor's tacks out as well. So let's take those out too. Put those out of the way so they don't get tangled up in our threads. And we've got our 2 positions marked now for our legs. The next thing that I do then is making sure that the toes are going to be pointing upwards. I'm going to go through the inside of the leg first and then come out on the other side. Okay, so I'm just going through a leg now, and then let me just move that out of the way because I don't need that. And then that's going to then sit onto the character. And because I've gone through my legs now, I can take my tailor's tacks out. Let's get rid of those. Let's get rid of them on the side as well. Okay. Well, I can see 1 thread left in there. How annoying is that? Okay. So then I then take a stitch through the leg, just like that, and come out roughly in the same place on the others, but not exactly, because you want to take a few little fibres of the leg with you. Just tighten that up a little bit, and then separately leave that leg dangling. You're going to go back through where your knot started off and come back on the other side here of your leg where you did your other little indentation for your other leg. So we're doing it in sections just to make it easier for us to attach these legs. And then on this one, we're going to go through the inside thigh again, and we're going to come out on the outside, and then we're going to go back in and out again in roughly the same places. And then because we've done that, we can now remove the tailor's tacks that were marking the positions for us. That one wants to get stuck in. So I'll just cut that one off close to the edge there, and that should be fine. Okay. There we go. Okay, so you've got got a knot in our thread now. Typical. Okay, it's come out. Right, so now that we've got our legs on and they're dangly, we can now start to cinch this in to try and get some sort of semblance of order with this. So again, we're going to just untangle this a minute because it's got a bit, we're showing off with our dangly legs. They're quite far back, these legs are actually, aren't they? So now you can kind of hold them together. This is the trouble with long thread, it gets caught everywhere. Okay, and so I'm through a leg, so I'm going to go back through the body, maybe a little bit slightly further forward towards the front of the character as well, and through the other one, and then through the leg, and come out roughly the same place again. Just make sure you've not got tangled with your threads. That's it. And just keep practicing your character sitting down. Quite splayed legs at the moment. Let's have a quick look on the character. So Florin has, but the other one hasn't. Okay, let's just keep going. Can you see how they're quite close to the back there? You might want them to come a little bit further forward, I think. Right, so I'm going to thread a button on now. So I go in and out on the button on the diagonal. So the button's just attached, and then we can go back in through the character's legs, through the body, and then we're coming out the other side roughly where the indentation was. Perfect. Just move your button down your thread as you're tightening it up. Just make sure you don't get any loops in your threads as well, because they're really difficult to get out if you leave them in. Make sure your button's the right way round as well. There's a little bit of a ridge around these buttons. Let me just also take a measurement of the buttons in a second, and I can tell you how big these are. I think it's in the kit opening video, but I haven't told you on here. So take a bite out of your leg, and then this is the tricky bit, because you're going straight through the leg and you're trying to go through the other side and through one of the holes on the buttons that you've already been through. So I just go through the same orientation of buttons to start off with. I don't start crossing them over. That'll be okay now, look, see, it's kind of coming okay now. And then another stitch holding that together and coming out in the same holes that we've already used. Will that one work? No, that's the wrong hole. And you can twist the buttons sometimes if you need to, just to get the right. This is the bit you need patience for after stuffing all your legs. But you're on the homeward stretch now. There we go, found a hole. And we're just cinching these in now. Okay, so back through again, but I'm going to go the other orientation on the buttons now. That's so typical, I get the other hole straight away. There we go, other orientation on the buttons. We've got his leg tangled up, let me just pull this through for his leg. It's the only trouble with working with such a long thread. It does want to get tangled up if it can. But at least then when you're at home doing this, you know that this is how it is. And then I'm going to go across to the other hole that's not been used yet, then across the body, and I'm going to use the hole on this side that hasn't been used yet. That one's been used, that one hasn't. Okay, let's make sure you're... If you watch any of my other videos, you know how to do this already. There's nothing new with this. This is purely for people who haven't done any of the Lunar Lapin characters before and are just wondering how you actually attach all of these bits together. So then we're just going to do another couple of stitches through the other orientation so that we've got all of the... Oops, that's the wrong hole for the button. And you just have to just keep poking your needle backwards and forwards, and eventually you will find the needle. The other thing you can do is press down on the button, and sometimes you can twist the button to make it find the right hole as well. Just be careful though, because the needles are really sharp and they're very long, so they're a bit unpredictable sometimes. That's the wrong hole. That's the right hole. Okay. So you're aiming to make your crosses in the centre of the legs the same distance, same number of stitches through them. And as you can see, it's just trying to get that needle to come out through the same place. And there isn't an easy way of doing this, as far as I've found. It is just trial and error and just taking your time and just knowing that it does take that length of time to do it. Okay, so on this one we've not got too much thread left, so now I'm going to go back through the character, but I'm just going to pull away the leg from the inside leg so that I can expose where the needle's going to come out, and I take my needle out there. I then snip off my doll needle because we need to change to a thinner needle. Still a decent size one because this thread's quite thick. And do just lick the end. Oh, there's my glasses, because that'll help me thread my needle while you're all waiting for me. Got hot hands as well. It's very hot over here in Spain at the moment. It's been about 28 degrees today. So it seems a bit ironic that I'm sewing things for Christmas when it's 28 degrees heat, but then everybody in Australia will totally understand, won't you? Okay, so we've got just a hand sewing needle now onto the end of our threads. Those legs are firmly secured. Oh look, I've got a little loop on my threads. Just separate out your threads and just give them each of them a tug, and as you can see it's just gone back in again. So just check that before you cast off. Then just holding the leg slightly out at the inside leg, what I do is I take a few stitches just in the same sort of spot. And this just starts to tie off this thread for me. If you run out of thread when you're sewing your legs on, then all you need to do is just make a long tail through your body and cut it off. Then start again the same way that we did before. So start off with a knot, but hide it in the inside leg. Just make sure it's not got too big a tail on it, because you don't want that to look messy on the inside. I mean, these are all going to have clothes on anyway, and it's unlikely that these will be dressed all the time, because once they're in their outfits, I think they'll stay pretty much, well mine will anyway, will stay in the same clothes. And these are smaller than the main Lunar Lapin characters, so you're not going to be, let me change my needle to one that's easier to thread. So you're not going to be changing these, because generally they're going to just stay in the same outfits. Still nice to know that you've made them as nicely as possible though. So a few more stitches just in place, just on that inner thigh or that inside leg, just to knot those off. And then when you're happy, we'll do what's called a surgeon's knot. So you make a loop with your stitch, and then you go through once, but don't pull it tight, and then go through twice, through that knot, through that hole, and then pull it tight quickly, and then that'll cinch that in and hold it tight. And then I put my needle in through the body, right close to where we were, and then I push on the body so that I can see the needle coming out. And this is what's going to give us that long tail. And then pull on your threads, and then when you snip through, those threads will pull straight through into the body and will hide there. So there's that character there. I think on Mary I might put her legs a little bit further forward, because that just feels like it's quite far back for me. But again, you know, you've got some flexibility on these, because it's up to you where you put your legs, so have a look and see. So let's now attach our arms. So again, take a good couple of meters length of thread. We're back onto our doll needle again. We're going to thread that up. You can't do a quilter's knot with this length of thread because it gets all knotted up. So just do a traditional one where you just wrap it around your finger and then just pull your fingers together and you'll get a nice knot there. Make sure there's no knots in your thread. And we're going to start again. I'm going to do the arms exactly the same way. So I have lost my tailor's tacks on my body for my arms. The key things with the arms is you want the thumbs pointing up, just like you want your feet pointing up, you want your thumbs pointing up. So let's go through the body about here, and you're trying to come through about the same place on the other side, and just have a look and see if you think that's even. I think it is. Let me just give you a triangulation for how I'm doing with this. So that's 2 centimetres down, which is about 6/8 of an inch down from the neck edge. And then it's 1.5 centimetres in from the side seam here, which is about 1/2 inch, just so you know. So again, let's just do 1 stitch there. Don't put it too tight. And then we're going to go back through and come through to this point here. That should just take some tension off that knot when we start sewing. It's all about making sure things don't kind of come undone when we don't want them to. And then what we're going to do then is choose an arm and making sure that your thumb is pointing upwards. We're going to go through the inside arm and out through the outside. And then because we've got those places marked now, we can take our tailor's tacks out because they've served their purpose. And then taking a bite of the arm, going to go back in again through the arm and then back in through the body, taking a bite of the body. So you don't go back into exactly the same place, you're kind of taking about 1/2 centimetre each time, aren't you, just of extra fabric. Well, that's a nice positioning for the arm. That's okay, I'm happy with that. So where's Florin's other arm? Here it is. And then on this one we're going to go through make sure the thumb's up. So if I hold that against the body, I can see which side the thumb is, and then I can see which side to go through the inside of the arm, through the outside. Tailor's tack can disappear again. And then taking a bite of the fabric, going to go back in again, out through the arm. So again, I'm not attaching the buttons just yet. We're just purely getting these arms into position first, and then we can go through the body and come out on the arm this side. Because it's just about getting that placement, and I have tried attaching them all in one go, and just for me it just felt like it was a real chore and really fiddly. Right, so now we've got our arms on, let's attach our buttons. So in and out on the diagonal for your button, and then just letting your button go loose. Take a bite out of your arm through the body and coming out the other side. And these are quite big buttons, so you have got some leeway as to how to position these. Make sure your threads stay nice and neat. Oh, Florin, you've got a bit of a list on, that's better. Okay, and then we're on this side here. So let's then put our button through on the diagonal this side and take a stitch back again. So you're getting the gist. I'm going to just keep going backwards and forwards. I'll probably do 3 stitches in one orientation on the cross of my button, and then I'm going to switch over and do 3 stitches on the other side so that we've got those tied on nicely. And then I'm going to again just ease away the arm and then expose the threads on the inside arm, and then I'm going to do my stitches, my back stitches around there before, and my surgeon's knot before, which is the 2 wraps through the loop, before then coming through the body again. And then once we've done that, you can then move on to your next character and get them all finished. And then we'll be having our merry party for Christmas. These are quite wide, these legs are. It's okay for Florin, I think, but I think I'll move that forward in future. Can you see how close it is to the back? Oh no, we've got one little thing. Gosh, I said to you that I'd forget, didn't I? We need to find our little pom-poms for our little tails. So just find your pom-poms from the haberdashery. I'll finish off doing the legs, the arms first, and get that all finished, and then I'll come back to you and we'll just sew a little pom-pom on the back here. But I was just showing you, wasn't I, how close those are to the back seam, and I think that in my future ones I'll just move them slightly closer to the front in the hope that they're not quite so splayed. But for Florin it'll be okay, but I think for the others I'd like them to be more like that. Okay, rather than like that. So yeah, just have a look and see what you want to do, and then I'll come back to you in a moment and we'll be attaching our tails. Okay, excuse my messy workbench here, but now we're just going to attach the tail onto our character. So if you just go to where these are attached, if you just kind of put a little pressure on the thread there, you'll just be able to just snip that tail off. It doesn't pull through, so you'll just need to just be careful, just snipping it off so you've got a thread like that. I'm then going to use some pure white thread because I think it'll be easier to stitch with that and to make sure that you can't see where we're sewing. So let me just get another needle. So if we just thread this up now and have this double and put a knot at the end, just so that we've got that together. And I'm going to put a few stitches through the tail first, just to hold that in place on the tail. Let's do that quarters knot, there we go. So I'm just going to now just go through my tail 3 or 4 times, just small stitches through, because it does tend to indent where you go through, but it'll just hold and just in a couple of different directions so that you're not all in the same place. Oops, come on. There's a hard bit in the centre of it, so you can just make sure that you're engaging with that bit, because that's what's going to anchor it down. Got my threads there, look, from my knot, so I'm just going to snip those off just flush with the tail. And then let's turn you over, Florin. I've got some bits on you. And then I'm going to just kind of put it at level with the buttons, but between the back of the legs. So let's just take a stitch through the back of the character, and that should just sit there just nicely. And again, just take a couple of stitches just through the character on that back seam first, just to hold it together. The legs are in the way, but we just need to hold that. And then I'm going to go up and through the tail again, and then back down again. So it's a little bit wobbly at the moment, but we'll cinch that in and make that tighter as we go on. So again, another stitch through that back seam. Make sure you don't catch the top of the legs when you do it, and just give it a little pull, and that will start to cinch that in. And then back up through the tail again. And down through. Just find your way with your needle through. So I'm not trying to go through the body and through the tail in the same stitch. I'm coming through the tail first and then locating a stitch through the back seam on the body. Not too wide, because otherwise you'll see your stitches. Then that's starting to get nice and firm on there, but you can just see how the stitches do indent on the tail, so you do just need to be sure or try to not cinch it in too much. My hands are slipping because they're hot, and that feels fairly secure to me now, so I'm going to go back to the tail now and just sort of go backwards and forwards underneath where I've stitched it down, just missing the tops of the legs. And this is in place of those little back stitches that I said to you before. We just tidy it all up so that we can hold that on. Just make sure you don't catch any of your legs. I know I've already said that, but it's easy to forget. So the legs are all still free of the tail. And then I'm going to do a little stitch and do a little one of those surgeon's knots. 1 and then 2, and then tighten that up right close. And then I'm going to now bury my threads in the body. So again, squeeze the body so you can see the needle coming out first before you let go, otherwise you'll have problems trying to find it. And then pull on your threads and then give a snip, and that thread will then disappear inside. So there we go, we've got our first character all finished. That's how it's looking, all nice. As I say, the legs take a little bit of time and patience just filling. The arms slightly less so because they're not so bad. Faces are really pretty and adorable. Those little buttons are just the perfect size. Happy with those, and the little cross for the mouth, happy with that. We know we've got a little affirmation inside as well, which is quite nice. And these will all now be ready for making up our clothes. So I'll just turn the screen round and I'll just do a little roundup, and then we'll and say thank you to our sponsor as well. And before I carry on finishing my other two. So I just want to say welcome to our three little friends that we've all got finished here. One last thing I did do was I've just put a little scrap of fabric with a little initial on the back. So P is for Pere Hiver, I've got an M for Mary, and I've got an F for Florin. So all three of them are now labelled up and ready for their outfits. So the next videos that you're going to see are going to be the clothes. I'm going to start with Florin's clothes, which is the green outfit, and then move on to Mary's, which is the angel outfit, and then we'll finish with Pere Hiver, which is the Father Christmas outfit. And I have to say, I'm really looking forward to working with those fabrics and actually putting those outfits together, because I think that's really something new and something unique. So it's going to be great working with those, and as you could tell when you saw the kit opening video, I was thrilled with that, and with the little haberdashery bag. So we'll work together with all of those and get those to come together. But for now, I just want to say a really big thank you to Anne Heldeos for her kindness in sponsoring the kit for the Festive Friends. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video so far in making our little friends. They're very similar to a Luna, but as I say, if you've not made any of the Luna Lapin characters before and you're just joining along as part of the Christmas in July, then it was important that you know how to create your little base characters first of all, before we then move on to the outfits. So thank you very much, Anne, for your support and your generosity in helping us to make these videos. Really do appreciate that. And I will see you all again. If you've been watching along, please do consider subscribing to my channel. I really would appreciate that. And hopefully you'll find value in the videos that I put out. But also, if you press the little notification bell next to the subscribe button, then if I do, well, not if, I will be, when I do upload more videos, then obviously you'll be notified about them. And now the thing that you might notice well about my channel is that I don't just make these little toy stuff characters. My main passion is actually dressmaking, and I feel that the making of these small characters and their clothes is a perfect introduction. And working at a smaller scale, so you're not working with meters of fabric, in order to have a go at some dressmaking on a much smaller scale and much more economic scale as well, if you wanted to. And most of the fitting issues aren't there that we have to try and incorporate when we're fitting real bodies. So when you see my videos, you'll see dressmaking videos on there as well. I also like to do cross stitch, and I also like to do quilting and things like wool applique, that type of thing. So there's a whole variety of videos that will pop up. I hope that doesn't switch you off. I hope the variety is of interest to you, because certainly I don't stick to just one discipline. I like to flick around a bit. But if it's not a video you're interested in, just pass on by. I hope that I don't lose your subscription because of that. So I just want to say a really big thank you to you for watching, for being around, for watching my videos and for supporting me. I really do appreciate it. I hope you have a great day. I hope you enjoy stitching your characters as well. And I hope you'll join me again for the rest of Christmas in July, when we will be making all of the characters' outfits. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.